Hello, Arc Junkies, and welcome to this week's episode. As many of you know, I had the amazing opportunity to go to CANWELD 2023 in Moncton, New Brunswick with the Canadian Welding Bureau. This was a great event full of awesome speakers and presentations on pre- and post-heat, modes of metal transfer, automation, and a slew of other topics. I had the esteemed opportunity to be invited to the conference as a keynote speaker on the last day. My buddy Max Ceron and I took the stage in a between two ferns type of setup to discuss the current skills gap. While most welders will argue whether it's a skills gap or a wage gap, I personally think it's both. The fact of the matter is, it's not just affecting the U.S. It's also affecting Canada, as well as many other parts of Europe. In this episode, Max and I discuss some of the things we as professionals, business owners, and manufacturers can do to attract young talent into our industry. I'm sure many of you all have heard the old adage, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it's going to take an industry to bring in the next generation. There's not just a one-size-fits-all solution. But I give my 2 cents on how we can start to make a change. We'll get right into the episode after a quick word from our supporters. Today's episode of the Arc Junkies podcast is brought to you by CK Worldwide, the standard in TIG welding. CK has been in the TIG welding game since 1967, crafting some of the finest torches, parts, and accessories on the markets. Have you ever tried the CK Flex Lock torch? I have, and it's by far my personal favorite TIG torch that I've ever used. I even bought one for my home shop. If you haven't had a chance, hop on over to their website, ckworldwide.com. The Flex Lock has a unique 360-degree rotating head, and it's a game changer that's available in both gas or water-cooled machines. Combine this torch with the Superflex cables, and you're set with an unmatched flexibility and long-lasting performance. Other CK innovations include the gas saver kits with glass nozzles, providing better gas flow coverage and visibility while saving on gas consumption. And their recently introduced MT375 AC/DC TIG welding machine with water cooler and cart. When it comes to TIG welding, CK Worldwide isn't just in the game, they're leading it. Equip yourself with the best at ckworldwide.com. We're also brought to you by Rockmount Research and Alloys. Rockmount makes the coolest, most reliable rods and wires specifically designed to weld in the harshest environments, which is exactly where we as welders usually have to perform our craft. Their electrodes allow you to weld through dirt, paint, grime, oil, hydrocarbons, and other junk that's always in your way, and it's still going to provide you a quality weld free of discontinuities that you'd end up with had you used a traditional electrode designed for initial fabrication. Rockmount not only carries rods and wires for maintenance welding, they also carry burrs, bits, blades, threaded inserts, and most recently, hoods and papper systems. Check out their website today, rockmountwelding.com, and see their full line of consumables and gear to help you weld stronger so your repairs can last longer. And as a listener of the Arc Junkies podcast, you can use promo code AJP at checkout and get a free 1-pound tube of Tartan AAA when you spend $250 or more on their website. Get the job done right the first time, every time with Rockmount. We're also brought to you by Outlaw Leather, quality welding gear built right here in the United States in Pasadena, Texas. Outlaw handcrafts each one of their leather pieces using only the highest quality of leather so that your gear will stand the test of time. My buddies over at Outlaw create the coolest custom pieces in the industry, and they're the original. Don't be fooled by the copycats out there. Support the folks that put the design on the map. You can reach out to Outlaw and get one-of-a-kind leather gear like welding hoods, bolt bags, arm pads, rod pouches, utility belts, tool scabbards, and more. For custom work, just shoot them an email at info@outlawleatherllc.com. Or you can still pick up some of their in-stock pieces, which are still made by hand by going to their website, outlawleather.com. And as a listener of the Arc Junkies podcast, you can save 15% off on all their in-stock leather goods by using promo code ARCJunkies in the discount box at checkout. All right, y'all know what time it is. Fire up your machine, drop your hood, and turn me up 5.
Thank you for downloading show number 301 of the Arc Junkies podcast.
You're listening to the Arc Junkies podcast, helping you make every weld better than your last with each episode. And now your host, Jason Becker.
Good morning, everyone. How are you all doing? Day three, come on. Who's tired? Put your hand up. Oh, there's a few. Okay, now who's ready to learn? Okay, it's about the same number of hands, sorry. The rest of you are undecided. All right, so today's day 3. We got an action-packed day, lots of fun stuff. So now we're going to roll into the first presentation of the day, which is a keynote between Jason Becker and myself. Jason Becker is a fantastic person. When I started the podcast with marketing, which was before I was working for CWB, he was one of the people I reached out to and said, hey, CWB's approached me and said they want to start up a podcast. I have a background in radio, so they reached out to me and I thought, this might be a fun project. I reached out to him online and said, hey, I'm looking to get in the podcast game. Is there anything you can give me for tips and tricks? And he runs the most popular podcast in all North America for welding trades, Arc Junkies. It's a fantastic podcast. He has been so open and friendly and supportive that it's now created a 3-year relationship that we have gone back and forth supporting each other at different conferences. He works with AWS, so he's been able to help me get support with AWS, and it's been an absolutely magical experience working with the guy. Now, he's bought and opened a school as a trainer. He used to work at Valencia College in Orlando, Florida as an instructor, and now he has his own welding school in Orlando, Florida called Underground Metalworks. So Jason Becker, if you want to come up on to stage. This is going to be a fairly informal scenario. I don't know if anybody here has seen the Between Two Ferns. So we're going to have the conversation here, and we got some questions but I want to prompt some discussion. Once we get to the discussion point, I'm going to hand one of the mics to Daniela, mine, and we're going to see if anybody has questions for what we're going to be talking about in terms of addressing the skills gap, market gaps, and the comparison between a U.S. educator and a Canadian educator, and if we can see what the synergies are. So Jason, welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, Jason, let's start with how your trip has been to Canada so far.
It's been great. This is my first time in Canada, so thank you all for having me and giving me such a warm welcome. The people here are amazing. That's the first thing I noticed off the bat. It's true what they say. Some stereotypes are actually positive, and the fact that most Canadians are very polite people and welcoming people, that's 100% fact. So thank you for welcoming me into your country. I've had a great trip so far.
Now, you're an educator. You've been an educator for a long time. You were previously an iron worker, came up as a welder in the southern U.S. there. Now, as an educator, what do you see being one of the biggest barriers that you encounter in terms of addressing this skills gap? Because this skills gap is not just here. It's around the world. And I'm sure in Florida, you just told me this week, it's second largest area for manufacturing in the U.S., which I didn't know. So that means that you need a lot of welders, right? The gaps that exist there, how do you look at addressing those gaps?
I would say doing what we're doing now, being a resource for the community. So as everybody's familiar with, there is a skills gap in industry. There's also a skills gap in education. If you go into most schools, you're going to find that the average welding instructor, they've only been in industry for maybe 3 to 5 years. What have you learned in 3 to 5 years that you're going to be able to pass on to the next generation of welders? I mean, at some point, you're still technically an apprentice at that point. So providing resources for educators, whether it's the online YouTube content, the CWB Association podcast, all the great resources that you all have for your members online, the different podcasts that we run. Like I said, I did videos for weld.com for a while. That seemed to help out a lot of educators in kind of getting to the meat and potatoes of the actual training.
Now, during that skills gap assessment, when you're looking at what you said, you have a skills gap with education as well. What about the skills gap with technology? From what people are learning, the access for technology in the schools, and the technologies we see at conferences like this, where it's these amazing machines, these amazing things, but we don't really have them in the schools yet, and we don't really have students learning on them yet. How do you address that when you have a group of students in front of you?
So I was pretty fortunate. The school that I was working for, we had a great grant writing team. So we were able to purchase a lot of new advanced process welding machines. A lot of schools don't have options to be able to get advanced process machines, or like cobots are becoming a big thing, robotic trainers, automation, all the stuff that you're going to see out here from the different vendors. Technology is so far ahead from where they are in school as well as in industry. I don't think people are adopting it as fast. I think the price point to entry is a little off. It's kind of not attainable for a lot of schools, but we got to figure out a way to get that equipment into those students' hands to put them on a faster track. I mean, everybody's still stuck on Mode 5. Everybody's still running CV MIG when we got all these awesome, STT processes. You got Rapid Arc, Rapid X, CMT from Fronius. You got all these advanced processes, but nobody has access to it. So, I mean, you still have a basic skills gap, because trying to get people into this industry to fill these different voids, and now you also have all this new technology that's coming out at a rapid pace. So how do we get that equipment into the hands of the students, let alone how do we get that equipment into the hands of the instructors so the instructor understands how to utilize this equipment, because it's stuff that he or she has never used before. They weren't using that in industry. So we got to train the educators first.
Yeah, and that's something that I've actually struggled with in my career in Canada as an educator, is that many of the educators don't want to learn the new machines, right? You bring technology into an establishment, say, okay, this is the new toy that's been coming out. We put the grant in. We got 10 brand new Lincoln STTs rolling the door, and then they're in the backyard being gouged with. And that's something very common, and they're not going through the dials. Companies like Lincoln, official sponsor, will come to, a school, and they'll do a training session with you. They'll teach you, like they're good for that, and say, this is how it works. And then it's like out the year, right? Next day, everything's on CV, running at basics. So from an educator standpoint, how do we excite other educators to say, look, we need to lead, we need to be an example that we're comfortable with technology, not just like getting forced to teach it, but I see the value in this technology?
I think that has to come from demand, and that demand has to come from industry. So when I was in education, I worked very, very closely with local industry. I wanted to know, what is it that your company needs me to provide you as far as a labor force? What are the skill sets that they need to know? And they would give me that feedback. I'd take that to my administration and say, hey, I need to go up to Lincoln Electric for their advanced welding educator course, because they're doing pulse spray out here and I have no idea what that is. I need to go in there and learn how to use all these machines that you wrote all these grants. We got $1.5 million worth of equipment in there, and there's about 3 modes out of 498 different modes on that machine that I'm familiar with. I need additional training. And so my school, because demand from industry kind of prompted that, sent me up to Lincoln to go get some of their training. I know Fronius also does different training. They'll come on site and provide training. I know the local Lincoln reps, if you can't get up to the educators' workshops, they'll send a Lincoln rep out and kind of walk you through the machine, kind of go through the paces. But I still think you need, as an instructor, as a welder, as anybody in life, you have to be a lifelong learner. You can't just rest on your laurels and be like, I'm really good at short circuit and stick welding. I had to get out of my comfort zone. As an iron worker, that's pretty much what I was familiar with, was flux core self-shielded and shielded metal arc welding. Well, then I had to take a deep dive into advanced waveforms, gas tungsten arc welding, steel, stainless, aluminum, Inconel. I had to learn all these things because that's what industry needed from my students. And if I can't teach that to my students, now I'm a barrier. I'm helping drive a deeper wedge into that skills gap. So I had to bring myself up and get more educated, attend a lot more workshops, seminars, AWS section meetings. A lot of those things help.
Yeah. Now, the other gap is the students themselves, and the number of students that we need. Now, many of the colleges in Canada are fairly full and have been running fairly steady, but that's not enough. It's not even the tip of the iceberg of what we need. And I heard a statistic that if every school maxed out their welding programs today, it wouldn't even be a tenth of the welders we need tomorrow. So how do we start addressing that training gap? How do we get more welders to even come in to start the journey?
Yeah, the first problem would be to fill the classes that we currently have, because not every program is full across North America and Canada. So we have to figure out a way to make welding cool again. So if you think about it, a lot of the students that I dealt with, they got into welding because, I used to watch Monster Garage, or I would watch Orange County Choppers, and I would see them with the welding part, and I want to build my own car, I want to build my own bike, and welding is how I need to get there. Well, that's how you get them in the door. Now, how do I keep them? I can show you all these different skill sets, because a lot of people, when they think welding, they're like, oh yeah, I'm a welder, because they stuck 2 pieces of metal together in the garage. But we got to show them what's actually possible. I mean, structural steel ironwork, underwater commercial diving, aerospace welding. Show them the cool stuff. Like, I think the youth of today, they need to find value in what they do. So before probably our generation, our parents' generation, they went to work because they needed a paycheck. That's really, not the case in point anymore. People want to have value. They want to know that they're appreciated. They want to have drive. So you got to figure out a way to motivate them. How do we make welding look cool? And I think we were talking with Patricio yesterday about that. I think the show on Netflix, Metal Shop Masters, as I was getting out of education, we had a lot of students that were coming in because they saw that show. Now, mind you, that's an artwork show, right? It's a competition where people had to build sculptures in different pieces, and they were on teams, and then they worked as individuals, and it was a game show. But it exposed millions of people around the globe. I think it was translated in 72 different languages. It showed millions of people across the world what welding actually is. Welders are some really cool people, and we never get the credit we deserve. We never get the spotlight. So for one time on Netflix, we got to share the spotlight. We've got to figure out a way to do that again. Patricio's got some really good ideas. He had me sign an NDA yesterday, so we can't. I can't really discuss. No, he asked me not to say anything. If it happened
in this building, I get 15%. Just saying.
Okay. Well, it was outside. No, but no, I think that's what we need to do. Is in Instagram and social media, as much as the generation prior to us, they want to beat on that and be like, "Oh, it's pointless. You're just doing, the death scroll, and you're wasting your time." You know how much information I found scrolling through Instagram? I've seen welds that I never thought possible. And then I go back into the booth and I reach out to that person and I say, how did you do that? And the next thing you know, I'm doing it too. So it's that exposure. We have to show the youth welding is really cool. You can make an awesome living and you can meet a lot of great people in the process.
Yeah, it's true. We all know here in the steel industry, the welding scene in Star Wars. Right? We all know the welding scenes that are in Flashdance. We're like, that's not really welding. What are they doing?
I've had students that came through the program because of that movie.
Those are just seconds where they show a little bit of an arc in a feature film, and it creates conversation. Now, has there ever been a drama or a thriller about following the welder story? I don't think so. And it's true, that celebrity status that, police, lawyers, firemen, they all have a whole culture around them. And the welding culture has been kind of demoted, seen as, and I think that's over generations. It's been demoted in terms of where we are,
Well, for the longest time, everybody's pushed you away from skilled trades. Don't get into welding. It's dark, dirty, and dangerous. That welding is a plan B, or skilled trades are a plan B. Go to university. Go get a degree. If you want to be successful, make something out of your life, and be a respectable member of the society, you need to go get a degree. I did that. I went and got my degree. I got my bachelor's in construction management, and I was like, you know what? I'm not happy. I don't enjoy this. I want to go get back on my tools. I'm a kinesthetic learner. Put something in my hands. Show me how to do something. I'll figure it out. That's what motivates me. So I think that's one of the things we have to do is change the way that we structure education, because you take all these kids, they've got all these different learning styles. Some kids do not read well. And what do? We give them a textbook and we say, okay, go read chapter 2 through 5, and then we're going to have a test on Friday. Make sure you study all the information, and then you regurgitate the information on Friday, and then you start the process all over again at chapter 7 through 9. And you just do that, for the whole time that they're in high school, or, the whole time they're coming up through school. And you just breed a bunch of really good test takers. We don't find out what their actual skills and talents are. That's why I like the way they have the German apprenticeship program set up. I think it's by age 12 they identify. You're going to skilled trades, you're going to university. And both, regardless of which path you go on, both of those pathways are respected among society. We don't do that here. Well, I say here, I'm from the United States, but you guys might do things a little bit different. I've only been here for 3 days. But we don't do that in the States. We don't do that. Like the garbage man and the lawyer and the electrician and the plumber and the doctor, they're not all looked at on the same plateau. I've been in welding for 26 plus years. I've got my CWI, my CWE, like I'm the equivalent to a medical doctor in his profession as to what I am in the welding industry. But no, you're just a dumb welder. You stick metal together. But what can I do when I stick that metal together? I can launch rockets up into outer space. I can put submarines on the ground, in the ocean.
Hopefully not in the ground.
Not in the ground. I can put submarines in the ocean. Build race cars, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of people that can't pick up things and do it with their hands. So we need to identify and value those people and give them the skills and the training and the equipment that they need so that we can continue to thrive as a society.
Now we're talking about the support that we need to get trainers up to speed, schools up to speed, kids up to speed. Where do you think that support should be coming from? Should it be industry? Should it be the government? Should it be professional associations? All of them, some of them? Where do you see these places being?
I don't think it's a magic pill. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So I think it's an amalgam of everything you just said there. So we need the equipment suppliers. They need people to buy their products. What better way to get somebody to buy your product than to help and support? Lincoln does a great job supporting education, but I think there's an ulterior motive in there. As an educator, I get really deep discounts on equipment, electrodes, filler metal, consumables. My students are going to develop a brand loyalty to that. Boom. When they get out, they get buying power in industry, they're going to go right to Lincoln Electric because that's what they use. That's what they know. That's where, welders are big on red versus blue, right? I mean, that's usually a big conversation. But if you get all the OEMs in there supporting education, 100%, providing classes, discounts on filament metals, discounts on equipment, access to newer technology, and then in addition, you get local industry, the folks that are out there jumping up and down. I can't find any help. Have you tried going down to your trade school and putting in a couple hours a week and, showing the students exactly what you do? Bring the students on a field trip out to your facility. How many of y'all in the room work for a company and you can't find enough welders? Keep your hands up. How many of you have went down to your local tech school and donated 3 or 4, 5 hours out of your week to show them some really cool stuff? Or opened up your doors and said, hey kids, come in here and check this out. This is what we do and we're really proud of it. A lot of hands went down. A couple of them stayed up. That's awesome. Continue to do that because you're motivating. You're giving those students a reason. So now when they go back to the lab, they say, I really want to go work for that company. I thought it was really cool what they built. I think it's really cool what they do for the community. I'm going to focus on everything I need to do so that I can go work for that person. In addition, I think our government, speaking for the United States, because I can't speak for y'all, I think our government needs to get more involved with that. Providing skills or providing scholarships, grants, opportunities, promoting, advocating, showing a need, showing a necessity. So I don't think it's a magic pill. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution. It's got to come from everywhere. Industry, OEMs, the government.
Now, when we're looking at building these connections and having these collaborations to supply and hopefully start filling these gaps, where does the government have a role in this? In terms of, now I don't want to get political, but we do have the apprenticeship system here in Canada, and aside from the unions in the U.S., there isn't a national apprenticeship program. Do you see that as a fault? Do you see positives to not having an apprenticeship program, or is it something that you think would be worth modeling? We're not one and I wouldn't say even the Canadian. Germany has a great apprenticeship program. Switzerland, Ireland. There's great examples around the world. Is that something as educators in the U.S. you discuss, think about?
I've talked to several different employers in my local area. I can only do so much within my given area. There's only so many hours in the day. I keep trying to stretch into 25th, 26 hours. Just not happening. Patricio, I know you feel my pain.
We did last night. No?
Well, you worked into today's hours, so you kind of cut this one short. There goes that question. No,
the government apprenticeship.
Yeah. So, no, I think a lot of the companies that I've spoken with, they want to set up apprenticeship programs. They've actually invited me into their doors to, develop some sort of curriculum, some sort of outline. And I think that's the biggest thing is because you get a lot of these young students out of trade schools, they have zero skill sets. The people that actually knew what was going on at the job, they've left, they've vacated. I talked to Kevin. Kevin's a relatively newer welder. He's been in for 15 years. but he's probably the most seasoned professional at his shop running, 20 people. How do you train and skill up 20 people while you're on the job? You can't do that. You need to develop an apprenticeship program. Why not? I mean, I think that's the last place, for some reason, that's the last place employers want to invest their time, money, and resources is in their employees. They'll buy a new equipment before they send one of their employees out to a seminar or a conference. Look at the ROI. That equipment's only going to make you so much money based off the operator. What if I get that operator skilled up to where he's fully proficient on that piece of equipment? What if we do in-house training sessions? We shut the shop down for 1 day a week or 2 days a month, and we do an apprenticeship training, or we do it after hours, or we do it on the weekend, or the employers link up with their local trade schools and say, hey, what would it cost for me to send 5 to 7 of my employees at a time on a Saturday to learn how to read a tape measure? That's huge. And most people don't know how to read a tape measure. They're in this trade. They're slapping parts together. It's a sad fact, but it's true. Same thing with blueprints. There's a lot of people that are in industry that are fabricating that have a very difficult time reading blueprints. Let's set up a blueprint class. Let's skill up the workers that we have, because, even though we have a skills gap, meaning we don't have the bodies to fill those positions, we also don't have the educated bodies to perform that work. So why not set up an apprenticeship program? And it's a big conflict in the U.S. because the only people that typically run an apprenticeship program are the unions. And there's a big, depending on where you are within the U.S., I know the South's pretty laid back. We have, we kind of coexist, union and non-union. So most people think that, if you're going to do an apprenticeship, you have to go through a union. I really like what you guys do up here in Canada. You have the Red Seal Welding program. That's national or international. That goes everywhere. People in Germany know what a Red Seal welder is. People in Australia know what a Red Seal welder is. People in China. I could go on and on. Everybody knows about your program. I think what you guys do is awesome. We don't have that in the United States. A welder in Florida has a completely different skill set than a welder in Washington State, completely different skill set than the folks up in New York, completely different than the people in Texas. I love Texas, but it's a different breed of welders out there. There's not a national standard. As a welder, once you go through a welding program, it shouldn't be, okay, you're really good at gas metal arc welding. No, you should be a well-rounded welder. Plate, pipe, different alloys, all the six most basic welding processes. You should be proficient in all that, as well as blueprints, tape measure, fabrication, the whole nine. We don't have that set up. So in my industry, it's very heavy gas metal arc welding. So that's primarily what most of the programs teach. I wanted my students to be more well-rounded and say, hey, if you want to go to Texas, here's how you do open root. You want to go up to, some of these big industrial power shops, here's how you run a submerged arc machine. We had access to that. Not every program does. But I think our government should get together and say, hey, you know what? We need a national mandate. Here's the curriculum. Here's everything we need to remain competitive. Same thing with all the trades, not just welding.
And I travel the world with work, and I have had the luxury, I would say, and privilege as a Red Seal welder from Canada to be welcomed into many countries to do work, and no questions asked. No one's asked me to recertify, retest. It's just an expectation that I've met already. I can just show up and work. And I've said this before, and it's not a happy comment, but I've never worked with an American on a foreign project. There's people in these foreign projects from all around the world, but there's not American welders there. There's American engineers, there's American other things, but not welders, because they don't have that ability to travel, the mobility, because of they don't have that accredited system. And I would say that holds something back.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. This segment of the Arc Junkies podcast is brought to you by Everlast Welders. Are you looking to pick up your first welding machine? Maybe you're ready to upgrade from the machine you bought at the local discount tool store. Or maybe you need a machine, or a few machines for that matter, for your small business. Well, check out Everlast Welders. They have a machine for every skill level, budget, and process you need to handle. Even true multi-process machines like the Lightning MTS series. Check out their full list of power sources at everlastwelders.com and see which machine is right for you. And as always, if you buy any machine that comes with a stock foot pedal, get that free Nova foot pedal and TIG torch upgrade when you type in Arc Junkies in the comment section at checkout. Everlast Welders. Weld mean, weld green. We're also brought to you by Strong Hand Tool, my favorite manufacturer when it comes to fab tools and fab accessories. And right now, they're running all kinds of sales, like 20% off their gas cylinder grabber 2.0 with free shipping, 15% off Rhino Cart turntable packages with free shipping, and 10% Max tables, Rhino carts, lifts, and 5/8 fixturing kits, once again coming in with the free shipping. Check out these deals and more right now at stronghandtools.com. These sales won't last long, so pick up that new table or fixturing kit and take advantage of these awesome deals. Now let's get back to the show.
Oh, it does. I got a good friend and mentor, Don Watson, when I was coming up through the ranks as an iron worker. He had the opportunity to go weld in Brussels, but he did that through the International. So he was trained through the International Iron Workers. So he was able to actually travel and kind of do something very similar, no questions asked. I mean, he had to pass a test stateside before they invested all the money into his travel and putting him out there as the man to get the work done. But you typically don't find that. I've not worked with many Americans that have worked out of the Tri-County area that I actually live in. You know, they don't travel around. Some of them, you know, they may do paper mills and shutdowns and pipelines and all that stuff, but they don't travel outside the United States for work. But I think if we had an apprenticeship model set up very similar to the Red Seal program that says these are the standards and these are the boxes you have to check. AWS does things completely different. You know, if I get certified for Company A, it's only good for 6 months. I have to maintain continuity and get that signed off every 6 months, or I have to retest after that 6 month and 1 day time period. But it's not transferable to Company B. So when I go to Company B, what do I have to do? I got to retest. And when I leave there and go to Company C, I have to retest. Yeah. It's a vicious cycle. Whereas if you had something like the Red Seal program, you know, where I think your continuity is good for 2 years, and then you have some mandatory retest.
No, Red Seal's forever.
But with your welding certificate, you got to update your tickets.
Yeah, so the weld certs are through a wonderful company called CWB. And
I've heard about this. Tell me more.
And the certifications generally are 2 years. Some are, you know, shorter, longer, depending on what they are. But yeah, the practical exams for welding, so say like the tickets, like 47-1, which would be like a D11 for structural, it's a 2 year window for renewal, and they're transferable.
That's what I was going to say. It's transferable all across the globe. Like I said, my cert, if I test here on Monday at Company A, and I'm like, you know what, this is not worth the time and the hassle, and I go to Company B on Thursday, I got to retest. Not that that's a bad thing. I mean, welders are tested more than any other profession, hands down, in the world. I mean, we get tested more than doctors, more than lawyers, more than anybody else. I mean, you just get really good. That's why I tell my students, like, don't freak out. If you're going to take a welding test, don't freak out. Don't weld any different on your test plate than you did in the part in production yesterday. And don't weld that part in production any different than you would do on a test plate. You know, then you never really have an issue. You're always ready to test. You're just, tell me where you need to put this weld. Test plate, you know, rocket ship, whatever. You know, I'll put the weld on it. But yeah, I do think that we need to have a standard apprenticeship program that everybody receives the same training. And I think that's why stateside, everybody wants to say it's not a skills gap, it's a wage gap. It's not a wage gap, it's a skills gap. It's both. You know, like if you walk in, you want $46 an hour, you don't have the skills to do that. Your skills are the barrier, it's not the money. Because a lot of employers would be more than happy to pay the person if they were actually worth that dollar amount. But you can't come out of a school with a basic fundamental understanding of welding and demand $46 an hour. You need to go through an apprenticeship program. You need to be a journey person, you know, 5 years of training, X amount of hands-on hours. That's why I loved when I was with the union. I had an objective, I had a goal, I had standards I had to meet. Okay, you want to have your card to signal a crane? Okay, you're going to have 800 hours of hands-on training, and we're going to do about 120 hours in the classroom. Now I'm a well-rounded, you know, rigging and signalman, and I have a card to prove it. Yeah. We don't have that with everything else outside of the unions.
So in the spirit of time and to have questions, I'm going to ask the last question here, and this one's regarding AI and you know, the whole, I would say, automation cycle that's coming up, including artificial intelligence. We see the gap. We talk about the gap, and to be honest, everyone in this room knows we've been talking about the gap for a while now. It's been years that we've been saying, where are the welders, where are the workers, where's the things that we need? And the other side of that coin is from the automation side, is we see that as possibly the savior. All right, you know, there's that thought that, well, we can automate and then we can maintain production without having to rely necessarily on human interaction or limit or expand what that one human can do in terms of production through automation. Where do you see that going in terms of the welding in the U.S. and perhaps specifically in Florida? And how do you see that integration of the automation and AI systems?
So I actually just attended the Automation Expo and Conference last week in Columbus, Ohio for AWS. Very similar event to this, but it was based solely on automation. Automation's not coming. It's been here for 47 years. They were automating back. Henry Ford was actually using automated equipment. But now that we're incorporating AI, we're incorporating cobots. We're making this stuff easier for the end users, easier for the welders. The great news, it's not taking anyone's job. Out of the more than 20 presenters that were there, their main focus was, or the one thing they all had in common, is they said, these machines are not taking anybody's jobs. We're actually hiring more welders now that we've automated. We brought in 3 cells and 2 cobots. We need more welders. Because at the end of the day, the welder has to program that machine. I can't grab just, a robotic programmer or a technician and say, hey, make this thing weld. They don't understand. They don't have the theory of that. So I think it's coming in at a rapid pace. It's going to make things a lot easier on the welder. I think welding is going to be an easier pitch. If I want to say, hey, mom and dad, look, your son or daughter's not going to be under a welding hood, all day, breaking their back and breathing in smoke and everything like that. They're going to stand here with an iPad or a teach pendant, and they're going to be able to grab the head of this robot and move it around, and they're going to be able to make complex weldments, at lightning speed, and we're going to crank up production, and it's going to be better for everybody because we're going to get an ROI on our machine. We're going to be able to pay our welders better. We're going to be able to have better benefits. It's going to be more attractive. I think automation is going to make welding more attractive to people. It's going to be an easier sell.
That's awesome. So at this point, I think I want to go to questions with the audience. I'm wearing a recorder so that we're getting good audio of this so we can share it. So I'm just going to come out and run around with the mic. So hands up if you have a question for Jason.
Or Max.
Yeah. Well, or me, but these guys see me all the time. So if you have a question for Jason, please raise your hand. And if you don't raise your hand, I'm going to make you. So here we go. Patricio's right in front of me. All right, Patricio.
Thank you, guys, and thank you, Jason, for the plug. It's we'll go to fame. But I have a question for both of you, actually. I'm coming from engineering and a university. So my question is, how do you guys see that engineers or universities could help in this quest for a better welding world?
You can start.
Oh, thank you. I think just kind of being an inspiration, showing up to your local section meetings. And we have AWS meetings, all across the states. You guys have CWB meetings. Whether you all realize it or not, engineering students, you could be an inspiration. I met a young man yesterday. I believe his name's Eddie. I'm not sure if he's in the room. He started off as a welder, and he got inspired to become an engineer. And he started working as an engineer, and he was like, you know what? I really want to get back on my tools. And so he went back and he got into welding for a little bit more, and he's like, you know what? I really want to finish that degree. And he got back into, so he flip-flopped back and forth. So be an inspiration. Show welders that, just because you start off in welding, that doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all. You don't have to do that for the next 20 years. Now, I think, this is just my personal opinion, that if you start off welding and then get into engineering, you have a better understanding of what's actually happening, what's taking place under the hood at the arc. Same thing with inspection. I think people that have welded for a time, I think they make better inspectors. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of the AWS. But yeah, be an inspiration. Show them, mentor them. Especially if you have a welding program at the engineering school, go in there and work with the welders and kind of make them better. Show them why their welds actually matter. Because a lot of times they don't get the feedback they actually need. They're like, well, that weld's not great. Why? Well, it doesn't look good. Whereas from an engineering standpoint, you can tell them about the grain structure, what porosity actually does, or how changing specific gases is going to affect that weld bead profile or the penetration profile.
I would answer, I'll take the other side of that coin, and this is the angle of pride. So how many engineers are in the room? Right. How many of you are proud to show off what you're working on? All of you, right? Remember that welders are proud to show you what they're doing too. Often, the tours are for the engineers. You're going to check out the engineers are presenting, the engineers are at the conferences. How often are we going into the welding shops as engineers and saying, show me what you're doing on the floor? Reaching out to your local manufacturing plants that are building the table chairs, the things that maybe seem not so gratifying, and say, hey, can we come as an engineering team to come tour your manufacturing plant and see how you do things? And let the welders be proud. Let them have the space to say, look, this is where we work, this is what we build, and walk you through the process. That's going to tie, because what happens is that often we want to show off all these amazing engineering things that we're doing, and the welders feel like they're too far away to make that jump. So if you can make those first steps as engineers and say, you know what, we're going to come to what society considers the dark, dirty shop. We're going to come, and we want to see what you do. And we don't want to see your best robot. We don't want to see the fanciest thing you got in the shop. We want to see what you do on the 9 to 5. I think that would be a great first step. Another question. Over there. I'm going to walk far for this one.
That is far.
Yeah, you bet.
It's not so much a question, but a comment on what you're talking about, Jason, with regards to the instructors not having the advanced technology to be able to teach programs. I've been in schools training the instructors with our equipment, the snower, electric. What I've often seen is that the criteria is outdated. So when the instructors are looking at the criteria, it doesn't involve policy, it doesn't advance modified short circuit. They don't even move forward to try to teach the kids that technology.
So the great part about that question is I can speak to that because that was part of my journey, is when I went up to go for the different workshops. I came back, and when I tour shops for local industry, I would ask the employers or the supervisors, why are you running short circuit on that? They don't know. That's the way we've always done it. And I said, do you know what that machine's capable of? Let me show you something. Now I've developed a rapport with my employers. I've given myself credibility because I've increased their productivity just by changing the knob 2 or 3, clicks and adjusting their gas composition. Boom, now you're in spray transfer. Now you got cleaner welds. You don't have any spatter to deal with. Then they come back and they say, hey, we want more students from your program. How many you need? Now I can train my students, and I can also inspire industry to get into that change. Because the local sales rep can't get in there because, they don't want to speak to salespeople, but they're bringing in, a group of welding instructors or welding students. Like I kind of blindside them and say, hey, we can change the way you do things and increase your profit. And they're more than open. And that, like I said, that just develops a deeper relationship between me, the employer, and the students.
The other thing, too, is the integrators. The integrators themselves are not necessarily always up there with the advancements. So when they integrate, some advanced equipment on some robots, they go right back to straight CB. It goes into the shop, and that's all they're ever using.
Exactly.
They're not using it to its full capability.
Yeah, they're hauling manure in a Cadillac.
Yeah.
And from the Canadian side, I'll say that I've died on this hill a couple times as an instructor in Canada. For example, the Red Seal weld test has an open root MIG flat test where you got to bridge a 1/8 gap on a knife edge plate and do a full pen weld for a root. That's been a part of the Red Seal welding exam for decades. Well, modified waveform came out from every company, RMD, STT, CMT, whatever. That's built for that. It's designed technology for that. We got a bank of STTs and we got a bank of RMDs in our college at South Polytech in Regina. And we started doing the Red Seal program, running them a modified waveform on the open route. Guess how many fails we had from that day forward? Zero. I had the trade board representative come to our college and say, I don't think you can do that. And I said, this is the technology that we have available for us for that specific weld on the Red Seal exam. How is it not for that? And he said, well, it says in the learning outcome that it has to be a short circuit process. And I said, well, is it not? I sent some letters out to the suppliers. I said, tell me this is not a short circuit process. It is. So we got the approval, but I had to fight that fight to use the technology even at the education level. Yeah. Another question. All right. Hi, Michelle.
Thanks, Max. Jason, thank you so so much, and I feel like I touched upon the question I was asked, but I'd love to dig a little bit deeper. And that is, as an organization, we're with ApprenticeSearch.com, but we really are a career development-focused organization about trying to help young people make informed career decisions. And I think, when you did the hand-raising activity around how much industry is supporting, we talked a lot about students, but predominantly at the post-secondary level. I think in Canada, we are still waging a war around the perceptions of skilled trades, and we're seeing some pendulum shift. There is still a lot of challenges within the schools themselves, but I'm really curious to know if you've seen any best practices for ways that industry can be engaging with youth earlier, because by the time they go to secondary school, they're in a building full of university-trained educators who are going to speak to that pathway first and foremost. So I'm just curious from your perspective, Jason, if there's any best practices that we could be harnessing so more industry is engaging with students at an earlier age.
Ooh, that's a tough one. A lot of times different schools have show and tell days, or parents come in and talk to the students. Maybe have the employers set up a possible virtual field trip, because obviously you can't have folks under 18 walking through the shop floor, but do a virtual field trip. With access to the technology that we have, you can get great quality video on your phone. If you have somebody from local industry go in and speak at the local middle school, because I think that's where we're missing the gap. We need to get them earlier, because by the time they're in high school, they're not focused on anything. They've got no aspirations other than, hanging out. We were all teenagers at one point. Getting a job isn't the first thing on your mind, but I think if we can show them a pathway earlier, do a presentation for a group of middle schoolers. I remember when I was in middle school, we'd have speakers come in from different companies like NASA, some of the big ones in front of the entire auditorium. But you're going to lose the kids. They're visual. Some video. Patricio's got an awesome video that I told him he needs to put on Instagram about this robot dancing to EDM with his students in there. But as simple as it sounds, that's very inspiring. That's something I remember from 2016. I remember our relationship because of that video. Inspire these students and show them what's actually possible, what welding actually does. Everybody kind of knows what a welder is, but they have no idea what we do.
Yeah, totally. And I guess my follow-up comment and my call to action for industry in the room is consider ways that you can be reaching out and working with secondary schools or even younger. And I recognize that you were in the corporate world and you were trying to get your work done first and foremost, and everyone's stretched then. That said, I do feel like there's this perception like we're waiting on this conveyor belt for young people to come off and immediately choose the skilled trades, with what I would argue we need more industry involvement earlier on to make sure that that's that first choice. Engineering and skilled trades are two of the most common placements that students at secondary school for co-op cannot find placements for. So if I could just put a call out, think about ways that you can be further engaging, because young people do want to be part of skilled trades and apprenticeship. They do want to learn more about welding and engineering, but we need more employers to open the doors to allow those opportunities to happen.
Sponsor some youth build organizations, or we have Future Builders of America stateside. We also have the Boy Scouts of America. Boy Scouts of America have a merit badge. The Future Builders of America, they get together once a year for like a 2-week session, and they teach them plumbing, they teach them welding, carpentry, masonry, landscape, hardscape, digging swimming pools. They teach them all this stuff, and they get to do it hands-on. And then the rest of the time throughout the year, they're focusing on smaller skills. But they actually, for those 2 weeks, they get to go out and they get to weld. They get to mix concrete. They get to put up a CMU wall. Just different things like that. Sponsor those organizations. Be a part of that. Be active. Don't just send a check. Send a check and a person and say, here's what I do, and here's how I started my journey, and this is why I think my work is really rewarding.
And also sponsor your local associations to help you do those things. One more question. All right.
Hi, mine's more of a comment, I guess, than a question. I'm representing a company in Nova Scotia, and one of the things that we're seeing in the province is what they're calling options and opportunities, a program that's in the high school system that's taking people into the trades, probably in grade 10, grade 11 era. They're identifying those kids that aren't going to go to be an engineer. They're not the academics. They're the people that want to do, want to touch, want to feel. We're seeing those guys and girls come into our shop on a fairly regular basis. We're having them come for a 2-week placement in grade 10 or 11, where they're getting a welding shield on, they're learning, they're seeing, they're doing. And we're seeing the small busloads of kids coming. We'll bring a dozen people in at a time, show them what we can do, show them, that CNC plasma table, it's burning stuff out. That's cool. You look at that, they'll say look at that all day. Give them a welding shield and an air rod. Let them burn something, stick something together. It's great. You really see them inspired. It's a neat program.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so that wraps it up. Jason, do you have any final comments that you'd like to give in terms of your impressions of CANWELD? This is the first CANWELD you've attended. What are your impressions here this week of the groups, the sessions, and the things you've seen here?
I think it's been great. I want to thank you all for coming out because just like any other volunteer organization, it relies heavily on its volunteers to show up. If you get 3 or 4 people that show up, you can't have a CANWELD. So just the fact that everybody in this room is here on a volunteer basis, the speakers are here on a volunteer basis. They're passionate about it. The students are here. The engineers are here. They want to learn. It's really cool to see that. This industry needs all of us to survive and thrive. Keep doing what you're doing. And like I said, reach out to your local trade schools. Reach out to your local middle schools. Get involved with them. Show them how cool this stuff really is. I like these different events because I get to hang around my people. Even though there's a border that divides us, you're all my people. We're all welding nerds. We get excited. Every conversation that I've had since I've been here has revolved some way around welding because we're all passionate about it. We all enjoy welding. The sessions that I sat in yesterday, they're doing additive manufacturing with 7075 aluminum. That stuff is cool. It's supposed to be an unweldable metal because of short cracking, but now they're welding with it and they're getting ready to do tensile pulls. The conversation that I attended yesterday on the different modes of metal transfer because of the gas composition. I love that stuff. It's awesome. It's great that when I put it under my hood, I have an understanding of what's actually happening, starting at the bottle from the wire coming out, what that's doing to the profile of my weld. That's the information that welders need. It can't just be pull the trigger and make this weld. What's actually happening? Let me hear, teach me the science behind this. I always need to understand the why of things. Why does that work? How does that work? So sessions like these, different seminars, conferences, I love attending them. Max, I appreciate you having me up here. It's been a great experience overall, and I really appreciate the invite.
Awesome. So thank you, Jason. And for everybody that's been attending, make sure we keep going to the sessions. To find Jason, if you want to ask him questions after the fact, it's Jason Becker. His podcast is Arc Junkies, and his business is Underground Metal Works. Thank you, Jason.
All right, everyone, thanks so much for downloading the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are enjoying the show and all of the content, please leave a review on iTunes or Spotify. It really helps the show out. Also, please share the episodes with anyone you think would enjoy or find benefit from the content. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there, and until next time, make every weld better than your last.